Good day, race fans! I'm Unsilent, and we're on the air with the Formula One Drive-Thru podcast, coming to you just hours after the conclusion of the Hungarian Grand Prix, the Magyar Nagy-Díj, won by Sebastian Vettel. His 46th career Grand Prix victory, which gives him a 14-point advantage heading into Formula One's summer break, helped by a little bit of driver swappage over on the Mercedes side, and, well, the fact that the Hungaroring is just not very good for passing, as we saw throughout this race, even with DRS. But there's a lot of stuff to go through, mostly in the news and driver market department, so let's get straight to it. Here's today's topics. We'll start with the Hungarian Grand Prix review, then we'll take a look at the big rule change for 2018. The Halo is coming to the cars in 2018 after Sebastian Vettel got dizzy behind the shield. Sauber and Honda have cancelled their deal that was never officially signed in the first place. And then it's into the driver market news. We've got Ferrari contract extensions for Vettel and Raikkonen. Where's Kvyat going? Mercedes is looking at doing something with Wehrlein and or Ocon because of the ongoing situation at Sauber. And Robert Kubica is going to test for Renault this week in Hungary. Does this mean he's coming back to F1 in just a couple weeks? But first, let's start with a recap of the Hungarian Grand Prix. Here are the results. Vettel on top, just ahead of Raikkonen. Bottas in third, having been swapped back by Hamilton. That was the longest 5 laps to pass Raikkonen that Bottas has ever seen in his entire life. Then Verstappen fifth. Fernando Alonso with his best result of the season in sixth. Not his best run of the season. That would have been the Indianapolis 500. Then Sainz, double points for Force India, and hey, double points for McLaren. Stoffel Van Dorn comes home in P10. So let's start at the start, and it was a pretty calm start if you were Ferrari, but if you were Mercedes, you had the Red Bull swarming over you, and a little too swarming all over you if you're Daniel Ricciardo, who got punted by Max Verstappen in turn 2. Verstappen locks up into turn 2, slides wide and into Ricciardo, and punctures his radiator and left rear tire and ends his day right there. So that was not good. You don't want to take anyone out, but especially not your teammate. So that was a pretty devastating turn of events for Red Bull. 1, because they lost one of their challengers right away, and 2, because Verstappen was given a 10-second penalty for punting Ricciardo. It was a harsh punishment. I mean, it's like F1 is just like, oh, we're going to let them race. Oh, well, he was clearly out of control. It wasn't like it was malicious, like the Vettel thing where that got a 10-second stop-go. It's just like, you can never really figure out what the stewards are going to do in F1, and it's probably because they keep swapping the stewards at every damned race. Because you look at IndyCar and NASCAR, it's the same guys all the time, so you kind of have an idea of what the punishment is going to be for the crime. I think there's someone else along the way got a penalty as well. I think it was like a 5-second time penalty for shoving someone off the track. And it's kind of like, well, that was malicious. This was accidental, but are we punishing the result rather than the action? It's a very, as a Canadian, it's a very NHL thing. We're going to punish the result in the outcry rather than what actually happened. Not a lot happened after that safety car. We kind of sat back and waited, and all of a sudden, hey, Vettel's steering wheel is kind of effed. Because he's got to steer to the left down the straights. So something went wrong with the alignment on that car. They never really said what went wrong. You'd have to assume from pounding the curbs too much that there's something went wrong with the alignment because, it's okay. Either he put the steering wheel on wrong when we got into the car, which is highly unlikely, or something got knocked askew in the suspension going over a curb too hard or repeatedly over a curb. I mean, it did come back to him, so maybe he kind of, bumped it back into place accidentally, but it's just one of those things, it's like, if it was something broken, it would have probably gotten worse over the course of the race to the point of retirement. And then the other story would have been Lewis Hamilton getting the team order by Valtteri Bottas to charge after Raikkonen, but because you can't pass in the Hungaroring even with DRS, well, he just kind of sat behind him for like 20-ish laps. Lewis, you got 5 laps to go by him. It's all right. I think I'm having a problem with my radio again. I mean, Lewis did let him back in the last turn, but I mean, it was like, how many times have you seen Lewis not really pay attention to team orders? So everyone was a little cynical about it. Myself and like literally everyone included. Lewis did let him by, but I don't think that was a particularly smart idea because now, would have been an 11-point gap in the Drivers' Championship if Hamilton had stayed in third, but now it is a 14 points gap for dropping back to fourth. If the championship comes down to within 3 points, somebody is going to be kicking themselves for letting the swap happen again. So once again, there on the screen is the results. Raikkonen was the driver of the day. A very large Finnish contingent goes to the Hungarian Grand Prix, so they were quite happy to have both Raikkonen and Bottas representing Finland on the podium. And just a quick swap over to the drivers' standings real fast. Vettel by 14 points over Hamilton. Then you've got Valtteri Bottas 33 points behind in position number 3. Ricciardo and Raikkonen some ways behind that. And Max Verstappen leading the rest of the pack, but well off Raikkonen there as well. So I think it's on to the news, and let's start with the halo. There's a halo hanging from the corner of my girlfriend's four-post bed. Oh, Sugar Ray, right? I'm trying to remember my 90s pop music. Anyway, after the failed test of the shield at the British Grand Prix, the FIA announced that F1 will introduce the halo starting in 2018. The FIA was insisting that they had always planned to introduce driver head protection for next season after not getting it done for this season, but this is confirmation of what form it'll take. Now, it might be worth noting that the vote among the teams was 9 opposed and 1 in favor of the halo, Ferrari being in favor. However, the FIA decided to unilaterally ignore the vote and say, here's the halo. For some reason, though, the FIA has also increased the minimum evacuation time from the car to account for the halo. As NBCSN analyst Will Buxton put it, the FIA has also asked fire to burn a little slower. If you're that concerned about the halo impeding drivers to get out of the car in case of fire, you're doing it wrong. So the other big story coming out of the last race was the confirmation that Honda and Sauber have called off their deal. That's been rumored since the Austrian Grand Prix. On Thursday, the team confirmed that the deal was off after spending the previous 3 weeks denying that the deal was off. A number of reports say that the deal was never officially signed, so you can't really say the deal was canceled, it just was never signed. Now, there are 2 reports about why the deal was called off, each crediting one side of the deal. An initial report from Auto Bild in Germany said that Honda backed out of the deal because of the dismissal of Manisha Kaltenborn, Sauber team principal, who negotiated the deal. And there's the other line of reporting that Longbow Finance, who is the owners and backers of Sauber, canceled the deal because they want a more competitive engine for the car. Obviously, they found that more competitive engine for the car because less than 24 hours after the announcement of the cancellation, Sauber announced a reunion with Ferrari, so they will be getting the latest Ferrari power units over the next couple of years. Now, this is the first proper domino to fall in the driver market, which is why I start with this. Sauber-Honda was expected to field Marcus Ericsson with Honda development driver Nobuharu Matsushita, while with Ferrari engines, it's likely that Ferrari development drivers Charles Leclerc or Antonio Giovinazzi will end up in the second Sauber. Now, for their part, Honda is still looking to add a new team to their ranks. The top target seems to be Toro Rosso, with multiple reports linking the two, which was also the case 2 years ago when Red Bull and Toro Rosso were trying to drop their Renault engines. Now, interestingly, if Toro Rosso's Renault engine becomes available, McLaren is already eyeing it up and might swoop in and take it to get out from under Honda. Speaking of Ferrari, French publication Auto Hebdo is reporting that Ferrari has contract extensions on the table for both Vettel and Raikkonen. Vettel's offer is 3 years at about $138.5 million. Now, Christian Horner has told the press that he thinks that Toto Wolff is in Seb's ear, and he's trying to get Seb to sign a 1-year extension with a Mercedes switch in 2019 being the implication there. Now, Hamilton's out of contract after next season, so if Hamilton is thinking about retiring, or if he wants to do a retirement tour at Ferrari, for example, then perhaps Vettel goes over to Mercedes if he only signs a 1-year deal. Now, Raikkonen has a 1-year deal for $5.7 million on the table for next season. The likely case being that if Leclerc goes to Sauber next season, that it's 1 year of seasoning and right to the Scuderia to replace Raikkonen for 2019. And back to Toro Rosso for a moment. Just after it looked like Daniel Kvyat crashed his way out of Toro Rosso at the end of 2017, Horner has decided that he's going to turn silly season on its head again by suggesting that a contract extension for the Russian is a near certainty. Red Bull was pretty adamant that they would be retaining Verstappen, Ricciardo, and Sainz, which made Kvyat look like the odd man out. And it turns out that the odd one out might be 2016 GP2 champion Pierre Gasly, who was sent to Japan for some time in Super Formula, similar to what McLaren did with 2015 GP2 champ Stoffel Vandoorne. Now, Stoffel had a year in Japan before jumping into F1. Now, where Gasly lands in F1 isn't known, but a run in F1 doesn't seem likely if Red Bull retains all 4 of its drivers for next season. There is a line of thinking that if Toro Rosso gets a Honda engine, then perhaps Gasly, who is running Honda for Super Formula, Gasly might come back to F1 and take that seat from Kvyat. We know that Sainz was a very last-minute addition to Toro Rosso when he came in for his rookie season. So some people are thinking that maybe, just maybe, the same will happen to Gasly here, and he will pair Sainz in 2018. So you got Ferrari playing around with drivers, you've got Red Bull/Honda figuring out what they're doing with drivers. With all that, the biggest domino might now be what Mercedes does with its young drivers. Now, we've heard for a while now that Renault has been looking for someone quick to replace Jolyon Palmer for the rest of 2017. Felipe Nasr and Robert Kubica being the names floated around most for that spot. Now, Auto Hebdo says that Mercedes could pull Wehrlein from his Sauber seat and send him to Renault for the remainder of the season. Starting in 2018, that plan would have Esteban Ocon go to Renault, while Wehrlein takes up Ocon's seat at Force India. Now, there's a few interesting notes to the story. First, this was floated around while the Honda engine deal was supposedly in place at Sauber, but the need to find a new home for Wehrlein still exists after Sauber signed with Ferrari, and we're likely to see LeClerc at Sauber in 2018. Secondly, you've got Mercedes and Renault that are a year apart on the loan length for Ocon. Mercedes wants him there only for 2 years, Renault wants him there for 3 years. And the third thing is, before the season, it was reported that Force India favored Ocon over Wehrlein, which is how the Frenchman ended up there instead of Wehrlein. Now, of course, Ocon being French has value to Renault, which is why they want him over Wehrlein. So what we're looking at is if Renault doesn't find someone that they like to pair with Hülkenberg in terms of Kubica isn't ready, or if they can't sign Alonso, or if Perez stays at Force India. So what is likely to happen is one of the Mercedes development drivers, Wehrlein or Ocon, ends up at Renault on loan. The question is, who will go there, because they need to find a place for Wehrlein, whether it's Force India, whether it's Renault, but they have to find a place for him because he's not likely to have a home in Sauber and there aren't too many free seats. And one last Renault story for you. The hype train is leaving the station. Robert Kubica will be doing a test for Renault in the 2017 car at the Hungaroring test that happens later this week. The Polish driver has been out of F1 since 2011 with serious injuries to his right arm in a rally crash that seemed to end his F1 career, but Renault built a special steering wheel for Kubica to use, and he's had seat time in the 2012 Renault, and will get his chance in the latest F1 machinery. Yes, this is an audition for his F1 future, but Renault are saying, well, it's an audition for 2018, while the rumors are suggesting that it's an audition for the Belgian Grand Prix, which takes place in 4 weeks' time after the summer break. So we've got an interesting story here where maybe Kubica makes his comeback to F1, but it seems to be a bit more sizzle than steak right now if you were to ask me. And that will do it for this episode of the F1 Drive-Thru Podcast. A little shorter than usual, but none of the news has really been firmed up yet. I'm imagining we're going to get quite a bit of news over the summer break, and we'll have that all for you when we come back after the Belgian Grand Prix in 4 weeks' time. But if you're hanging around here on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, because we're going to have F1 2013's classic cars on the channel. We're going to have videos from F1 2017, maybe a little career mode, maybe a little classic cars, maybe a little multiplayer when that comes out. And of course, Grand Prix 2 carries on through the summer break, with the Hungarian Grand Prix being the next Grand Prix 2 video. So we've got lots of F1 and racing videos coming up on the channel if you stick around and subscribe. So until the next time, I'm Unsilent. Thanks very much for joining me. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you're new. Share on social media. Follow on social media. The social media handle is Unsilent on Air, and that is for Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Tumblr. And until the next time, I'm Unsilent. Thanks very much for joining me. Like, share, subscribe, and we will see you next time.